And no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change.
President Obama making no bones about how climate change figures into his agenda. Earlier this month, the White House announced new regulations aimed at dramatically cutting methane gas emissions by 2025. But today, Harvard researchers indicated that Boston could be getting in the way of that goal. WGBH science editor Heather Goldstone joins me now to explain what's going on here. Heather, thanks for coming in.
Good to be here.
So what did this study find exactly?
Well, basically they found that the amount of methane leaking out of natural gas infrastructure in the city of Boston is 2.5 to 3 times greater than what we thought before. So to break that down in numbers, 300,000 metric tons of methane leaking out, which is enough, they say, to heat 200,000 homes every year, and a total cost or value of $90 million worth of methane that's just leaking out of, and actually they don't know where it's leaking out of the pipelines, leaking out of homes, or being vented perhaps at power plants or other facilities. They're not really sure where.
How did they conduct this study exactly?
So what they did is they were actually taking what they call atmospheric-based measurements of methane and also of ethane, which they can kind of use to trace where the methane came from. That if there's ethane in it, it probably came from natural gas as opposed to coming out of a wetland or a landfill. And they looked at 4 different locations. You can see 3 of them on this map. 2 of them right in the city at Boston University and in Copley Square, and then 2 outside the city at Nahant and then in Harvard Forest, to try to compare what the situation is in the urban center versus outside, what they call kind of their baseline value.
And how in those 4 locations is the leakage greater in some places than others?
Well, they weren't. There are differences definitely in the leakage. They were trying to get more of a kind of area focus. They did do some specific modeling for the BU location versus the Copley location and find that there were differences in daytime versus nighttime and the timing of things. But the overall picture is this, this big number, the 2.5 to 3 times as much as we thought.
Why is more methane than we thought was around us ominous?
Well, methane is a really powerful greenhouse gas, so it's not necessarily about the really local picture. This is more of a warning that perhaps we need to be looking at the ends of pipelines more than we have been as a source of methane to the atmosphere, because methane, the number that's often tossed around is that it's 25 times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a heat-trapping gas. But in actuality, it doesn't stay in the atmosphere for as long. That 25 number is averaged over 100 years. If you look right in the first several years when it's in the atmosphere, it's more like 100 times more powerful than carbon dioxide at trapping heat. And so there's a lot of concern about the impact of methane on global warming, and that's why President Obama has now put that in as another target.
The 2025 goal.
Right, the goal for reducing, we're looking at potentially having methane emissions regulations in place probably by 2016.
How realistic is the president's goal? Because there's some concern that we may not be able to get as much power from clean energy as we thought we would, correct?
Right, yeah. I mean, we just had a report put out by the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources a few weeks ago, the so-called low demand study that was basically looking at whether or not we need more pipelines into New England to provide more natural gas. Because what has happened is over the past 10 years, we've seen a dramatic increase in natural gas usage in New England. We're up to 62% of our electricity now being generated by natural gas, and all the homes that have been converted, and we don't actually have a reliable supply to meet that demand now.
And is that because of the fracking boom in part, or is it for other reasons?
Well, so the fracking boom is part of why we've seen the increase in natural gas, and it's also been considered a bridge fuel. It's a clean air burning fuel, so at the site where it's burned, it's not emitting as much carbon dioxide as if we were burning coal or oil. But the problem is that we haven't really gotten a good sense of what you might call the cradle-to-grave environmental impact of natural gas. And what we've been learning over the past couple of years is there's really been this parade of studies saying there's more leakage at the extraction site, there's more leakage from the pipelines, and now this study hinting there's more leakage at the end of those pipelines as well.
Briefly, is this study going to make the case for the construction of more, newer, better pipelines, or a case for weaning ourselves off natural gas?
I think it depends on where you're starting, right? This could be the argument that in fact natural gas is not as clean as we thought, even at the usage point where we thought we just had a cleaner burning fuel. You could also make the argument that part of the reason that perhaps Massachusetts has more leakage than other places is the nature of the pipes. They're made of raw steel or iron, and that may be subject to more leakage, so that could be a case for building new pipelines. You could really spin it either way.
All right, Heather Goldstone, thank you.
My pleasure.